This is an Alabama's 13 News special event, Decision 2014, the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Sponsored by Extreme Concepts Incorporated, Waldrop Stewart and Kendrick LLC, Outsider Inside the Supreme Court by Sean McCutcheon, and Cartridge World Vestavia Hills. Now, here's tonight's moderator, Alabama's 13's Mike Royer.
And a very pleasant good evening, everyone. We are live at the Wright Center here at Samford University, and we welcome you to tonight's debate. It's an historic event, the first televised debate for the GOP nominee for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Tonight's debate is staged and presented by Alabama's 13 WVTM, presented on the radio by WYDE Superstation 101. It is hosted by Samford University and Samford University College Republicans and co-sponsored by the Republican parties of Jefferson, Shelby, Coosa, Bibb, and Blount counties. My name is Mike Royer, and we welcome you tonight on behalf of everyone at Alabama's 13 and Superstation 101. We'll meet tonight's participants in just a moment, but first, here is more on the district that is up for grabs. The 6th Congressional District of Alabama covers all or parts of 6 counties in our state. That's all of Bibb, Chilton, Coosa, Shelby, most of Blount County, and a large part of Jefferson County. There are roughly 419,000 registered voters in the district as a whole. The primary election will be held on June 3rd, and then the election day will be on November 4th later this year. Now we want to introduce the candidates. We invited all 7 candidates to tonight's debate, and all 7 are on the stage tonight. We begin with Tom Vignell, Chad Mathis, Gary Palmer, Scott Beeson, Robert Shattuck, Will Brook, and Paul DeMarco. Gentlemen, welcome. We're glad you're here. Asking the questions tonight are 3 respected journalists from our area: Barnett Wright, a reporter for the Alabama Media Group, which includes the Birmingham News and AL.com; Leland Whaley, station manager of WYDE Superstation 101; and Linda White, president of the Birmingham Association of Black Journalists and an Alabama's 13 Investigates reporter. Now I'd like to ask the audience, if you would, to please stand if you're able to. We will ask Dr. John Killian to offer our invocation tonight. Dr. Killian is pastor of Maytown Baptist Church. He also serves as the president of the Alabama State Baptist Convention and chaplain for the Alabama Republican Party. Dr. Killian.
Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for the freedom that we experience and know by your hand. Lord, we pray for our candidates and for the viewing public tonight, that you give these candidates wisdom and the public wisdom. Lord, may we have wisdom to know that which is right, and then conviction to follow through on that which is right. Honor yourself, bring glory to your name. And Lord, we do pray salvation for our country. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen.
Dr. Killian, thank you. Now, remain standing, and Eagle Scout Russell Galloway of Troop 63 and a senior at Mountain Brook High School will come and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Russell, thank you. Here are the rules that were discussed ahead of time for tonight's debate. Each candidate will get 1 minute for an opening statement. During the question and answer period, each candidate will get 30 seconds to answer each question posed by our panel. Each candidate will get 1 minute for a closing statement at the end of the broadcast portion of the debate tonight. That will be followed by an internet-only question period, which each candidate will again get 30 seconds to answer questions during that time. A computer program was used to randomly select the order of stage position, opening and closing statements, and question responses. We're going to begin tonight with opening statements. Each of you have 1 minute, and we will begin with Chad Mathis.
Good evening. I'd like to first thank my wife, Angie. We've been married for almost 20 years, and my kids, Abby and Ben, who are at home, hopefully watching on television. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and I paid for that college education working in the same factory as my dad. Angie and I paid for my medical school education, and we moved here, built a family, built a life, and have had the American dream. But that dream is under attack. It is under attack by Obamacare and our out-of-control spending and national debt. And it's not being helped by political insiders and career politicians. I am running to bring back the citizen legislator our founders were so fond of. I, in my candidacy as a doctor and a small business owner, am helping to bring back something unique to our race, and that I can help cure what ails Washington. Thank you.
Next is Will Brook.
I've never run for office, so many of you do not know who I am. I grew up in Birmingham attending public schools and working at jobs such as delivering papers, pumping gas, and waiting tables. I married my high school sweetheart, Maggie, who's here. Maggie told me at one point that she couldn't be unequally yoked in marriage, and that opened my heart to faith. The Lord came in and changed my life. My father was a Navy veteran who left me sure of his values, his love for me, but with little else other than a chandelier and a box of turkey calls. So I got to work and learned the dignity of earning a living and supporting a family. I also learned a lot about the resiliency of the American people. But things are not right in America. We need to make changes. I want to go to Washington and do that, and I keep a Constitution in my pocket to remind me of the things that make America great, the values that protect our dignity and our freedoms. And if I go, I'll use that as my guide. Thank you.
Now 1 minute for Scott Beeson.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to say I'm Scott Beeson. I currently serve in the state Senate. My wife is here tonight. If she'll raise her hand, I appreciate her being here. My 3 young children are not here because we, like so many of y'all, we have kids spread out all over Jefferson County. We have one child at a baseball game tonight. We have another one that had golf practice. My daughter's off in Jasper at gymnastics. And that's really why we do things. That's why I ran for office in the first place. But as for Congress, you will know what I'm going to do in Congress by what I've done in the state legislature. And what I have done is lead. I've not sat back passively and waited for other people to bring legislation. I've led on the issues that matter to the people of Alabama. I've led and passed pieces of legislation that have opened up thousands of jobs for Alabamians, saved countless numbers of unborn babies. I've defended the encroachments on the Second Amendment. I've fought illegal immigration so that taxpayers won't be burdened. And I've done the things that matter to the people of this state. I ask for your vote.
Next, 1 minute for Gary Palmer.
Tonight you'll hear a lot about repealing Obamacare, about cutting taxes and cutting spending and getting the economy growing again. But what we need to talk about are solutions and not sound bites. We will replace Obamacare with a plan that puts you in control, that allows you to put your money in a health savings account or get your insurance from your employer or buy a plan that meets your needs and that you can afford. We'll provide a national safety net for those who can't afford the insurance or can't get it, and we'll do it for a fraction of what Obamacare will cost. We'll use America's vast energy resources to get our economy growing again. In one area out west alone, there's 3 trillion barrels of recoverable oil, and the federal government owns almost 80% of it. We're not broke, we're stupid. We ought to be using these resources to create jobs and help people get back on their feet. Those are the things that we need to be talking about in this campaign, and that I'll be talking about for the duration of my campaign for Congress. Thank you.
Our next opening statement from Robert Shattuck.
Good evening. My name is Rob Shattuck, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to explain my campaign to you. My campaign is about a political class in Washington, D.C. that is doing a big-time number on the American people. Now you may say, what's new? Politicians doing numbers on the people? This is something different. This big-time number on the American people is a dire threat to the country's well-being. And the American people may have to act to save their country. I have some ideas. I hope this debate brings forth some discussion of the problem, the direness, and what can be done. I will carry on this conversation after tonight And come June 3rd, I think you will conclude that the other candidates have a woefully inadequate understanding of what is really important in this election. Thank you.
A 1-minute opening statement from Tom Vignale.
Good evening. I am Tom Vignale. I'm a small business owner, not a professional politician. I've never held public office. In fact, I've never run for public office. For the past 26 years, my wife and I have been running Royal Bedding, so we understand what business is about. We also have a family farm. We know what hard work is about. The federal government is coming in and they're making things so difficult for small businesses, they've lost the excitement about owning their own businesses. We've got to make a change. Someone that has run their small business and understands how to run and how to live under the regulation and taxation. I want to change that. I want to be able to be the candidate that will support and empower and encourage small business all across this district.
And next, Paul DeMarco.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening. This election is important because it's the future of our nation. We're at a crossroads when it comes to getting our fiscal house in order. My wife and I are expecting our first child in a few weeks, and we're excited. We're excited, but we're concerned because we're concerned that when our baby is born, that baby's share of the national debt will be over $60,000. That's wrong and it's inexcusable. But how do we stop it? We stop it by electing people of courage, people who are willing to take tough votes, and people who are willing to do what's right regardless of the political consequences. Not only fighting Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, that's the easy part, but even taking on members of your own party when they're wrong. I've got a record of doing that. I've done it in Montgomery, and I'll do it in Washington, D.C. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I look forward to the rest of the evening.
Gentlemen, thank you all. After we take this short break, we'll be back with questions from our panelists for all of the candidates. You're watching the Republican primary debates for the 6th Congressional District seat on Alabama's 13 and Superstation 101.
Welcome back to the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Sponsored by Extreme Concepts Incorporated, Waldrop Stewart & Kendrick, LLC, Outsider Inside the Supreme Court by Sean McCutcheon, and Cartridge World Vestavia Hills. Now, here again is tonight's moderator, Alabama's 13's Mike Royer.
And welcome back to the Republican Party debate for the 6th District congressional seat. I'm Mike Royer, and we're going to begin our questions now for all of the candidates. They'll have 30 seconds to answer all of the questions, and our first question tonight will come from Barnett Wright. Barnett.
Thank you, Mike. 7 candidates in the race. Simply, why are you the best man for this job?
And the first person to answer that question will be Scott Beason.
That's a great question. It's really easy to answer, and I alluded to it in my opening statement. I've served 16 years in the state legislature, and I've seen people who have sat passively by and waited for things to come to them and then voted, quote unquote, right. What I've done is I have taken the bull by the horns, I've led by example, I've been bold, and I've fought those fights that the people of the state of Alabama want us to fight, and I will do the exact same thing in Washington, and you can count on that.
Same question for Robert Shattuck.
For 6 weeks, I have been pressing on whether we have a dysfunctional Congress and why we have it and what we should do about it. I've gotten no answers from the other candidates. Senator Shelby and Sessions and Representative Baucus will not comment. If you believe that we have a severe dysfunctional Congress, I'm the only candidate who has been raising it, and that is the most important issue, and that's why I would consider myself the best candidate.
Same question for Will Brooke.
I'm a family man of faith who has a broad range of experience in business and civic affairs. I'm untainted by politics. I'm not a politician, but I'm determined to make a difference in Washington to preserve and protect the principles enshrined in our Constitution so that we can enjoy freedom in the years to come. I want to go make a difference in Washington, and I want to serve you.
Same question for Chad Mathis.
I'd say because I'm a doctor and a small business owner, and I'm definitely not a politician. The whole reason I'm running, I want to go and stop Obamacare and put in patient-centered reforms and really fight for the small business owner and the individual liberties that we so deserve in our government.
Tom Vignell.
As a small business owner, I haven't been passing regulation and taxation. I've been living it. It's time for Americans to send small businessmen to Washington, D.C. to resolve the business problems that we have. We're $17.2 trillion in debt. We don't need to continue to do what we've been doing with the same people. Elect a small businessman who understands how to live within his means and how to pay his bills on time.
Paul DeMarco.
I've got a track record for taking on the most difficult issues that have faced this state and this county. Whether it's the financial crisis in Jefferson County, whether it's trying to reform the Birmingham Waterworks Board, we need elected officials who will take on the difficult issues, have the courage to vote regardless of the political consequences, and even challenge our own party if we think they're wrong.
And Gary Palmer.
Washington can't change Washington. For 24 years, I've worked in public policy and helped set up a national network of state-based groups that are driving reforms at the state level. We're not going to change the country from the top down. We're going to need it from the bottom up. That's where I have credibility, a national network that can drive the reforms that we need for a country from the bottom up, put pressure on Congress, and make the change that we need.
Our next question for all of the candidates comes from Leland Whaley.
Gentlemen, Congressman Spencer Baucus has held this seat for 11 terms. That is 22 years. Do you favor term limits? And if so, will you commit for the record in front of this audience and the voters tonight that you will term limit yourself? And if so, how long?
First to answer that, Gary Palmer.
I'll limit myself to 5 terms, 10 years. And I'm not going to move up there. I'm going to commute. And while I'm up there, while I'm in Congress, I'll come back here and I want to host a monthly meeting to train people in the principles that our country was founded on, to teach them about the issues and how to apply those principles, with the idea that one day one of those people will take my place and hopefully someone in that group will take their place. This is not a seat that we should claim as our own.
Tom Vignell.
Bradley Byrne, our representative from Mobile, just co-sponsored a bill calling for a constitutional amendment on term limits, asking that the House of Representatives would not serve more than 6 terms. That will be the first bill I will sign. I believe we've got to change what we're doing because there is so much power, there is so much money, it leads to corruption. We've got to have people that are going to represent us and represent us for the right reasons.
Paul DeMarco.
Actually supported legislation that would allow the people of Alabama to decide whether they wanted term limits for their legislators. But if we have it, we need to make sure that every congressman around the country has term limits, as opposed to putting our congressmen at a disadvantage to other congressmen and put the 6th congressional district at a disadvantage to other congressmen around the country.
Robert Shattuck.
In Washington, there's a dysfunctional Congress and a government that is not of, by, and for the people. The primary culprit, in my analysis, is a money monster in politics and excessive riches and power for those that go to Washington. Congress needs to propose to the American people on a joint basis, Democrats and Republicans, coming up with a plan to fix the money monster in politics. Term limits may be a component of that.
Will Brook.
Congress is broken. We need term limits, 10 for the House, 10 years for the House, 12 years for the Senate. I'll introduce that bill. Second one is no one goes to Congress to get rich. If you go there, you should not go back and lobby, ever. It's honor enough to serve and come home. And number 3, Congress can pass no law that applies differently to itself than it does the American people. Congress needs, we all need to eat the same bread.
Scott Beeson.
Absolutely. I've co-sponsored such legislation in the state of Alabama. I do think Congress needs term limits, and I think the state legislature needs term limits as well. As you know, I term limited myself to 2 terms in the state House. That's 8 years, and I stepped down from the state Senate after 8 years. I think if you look at the track record people have, after a while they become ingrained in the system, and I've made that choice to step back, step away from those things, and lead and show people how to do it, and I absolutely would do the same thing in Congress.
Chad Mathis.
Well, I'm a doctor, and I plan on being a doctor once I get done, and I will serve no more than 5 terms in the House. I think it's important and critical that we send those citizen legislators to Washington, and they come back home and get back to work and build and grow our economy, and not make a lifetime of being up in Washington.
Question 3 will come from my cubicle partner, Linda White. And again, gentlemen, 30-second answer for her question. Linda.
Thank you, Mike. Gentlemen, we've had quite a winter here in Birmingham. The city has been shut down twice by snowstorms. The U.S. as a whole has experienced unusual weather. A new study released today talked about the long-term effects of global warming. Is it real? Why or why not?
Robert Shattuck, you'll answer first.
I don't know the answer to these questions.
All right, Paul DeMarco.
Short but sweet. The EPA is using concerns like this to regulate and injure and hurt our businesses and our citizens around the country. One of my first and foremost priorities when I get to Washington, D.C., if I'm honored by being elected, is to take on regulation by the EPA. They're using it, they're hurting our state, our nation. We've got to put an end to what the EPA is using that for.
Gary Palmer, you're next.
The report that Linda's talking about is not being reported accurately. They have lowered the threshold for climate change for increase in temperature from 2.5 degrees down. The bottom threshold is now 1.5 degrees. And a lot of the data that they've used is manipulated data. We've been working on this issue for over 10 years. We at the Alabama Policy Institute have put out reports on this showing that climate change is a natural phenomenon, not man-made.
Scott Beeson.
I don't believe in global warming. If there is global warming, man didn't cause it. And like others have said here, the radical left, the environmental left, is using this to hurt us in our energy production, which causes the price of the power bills you pay every month to go up. We have to fight those things. We have to fight that regulation from the EPA, but we have to be willing to go out and talk to people and explain to them when they're being told things that are not true, and that's what I'll do as your congressman.
Will Brook.
Global warming's been with us since the beginning of time. What we're seeing now is a continuation of that phenomenon, but our president is using it through the agencies to enforce his view for what America should look like. Congress needs to pull up its big boy pants and fight back at this. The idea that the EPA could close down coal production and power plants would cost 20,000 Alabama families their jobs. It's not acceptable, and Congress needs to fight back.
Tom Vignell.
The progressive left continues to make issues so that they can have power and they can control. They want to tell us what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And this is another example of how they do that. I do not believe in climate change or global warming. I believe that this is a setup so that they can regulate small businesses all across this country, and it impacts their ability to be successful.
And Chad Mathis.
I believe global warming is a tool used by the administration to expand its powers, especially through the EPA. We need a robust energy policy that will help our economy. We need to loosen regulations on our oil. We need to tap into oil reserves and our shale oil. And these are things that the administration is continuing to fight against and use the EPA and global warming as a tool for this.
Thank you, candidates. Up next, round 2 of the questions in our debate tonight for the 6th Congressional District seat. You're watching our debate tonight on Alabama's 13 and Superstation 101. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Now, here again is tonight's moderator, Alabama's 13's Mike Royer.
And welcome back to our debate tonight. These are exciting times, an exciting election. We have all 7 candidates participating in our 6th District congressional race debate tonight. We're glad they're here. We continue with questions now. Back to Barnett Wright for his question for all of the candidates. Barnett.
Thanks, Mike. Today marks the deadline for the enrollment for Obamacare. The question is not whether, but how do you undo, revamp, or tweak this unpopular law?
Paul DeMarco, you go first.
A market-based approach. Look at the way we buy auto insurance or home insurance. We do it with other aspects of our life. It's an important part of this nation's economy, the ability to be able to choose the doctor you want, take care of the family you want, and get the insurance you need. That's the type, a market-based system like we do with the rest of our insurance around the country.
Scott Beeson, you're next.
Well, from my legislative experience, I'm just going to have to tell you right off the bat, even if we take majorities in the House and the U.S. Senate, or the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, we're not going to be able to roll back Obamacare until we get a new president at the next election. But what we can do before we replace Barack Obama, and not with another Democrat, by the way, we can make sure that we try to pull all that funding back with our majorities. We know how to do that, and if we'll do that, we'll be on the road to recovery and putting back a free market-based option for health care in this country.
Gary Palmer.
We need a plan that puts you in control of your health care decisions. You can have a health savings account, you can get an employer-based plan, or you can buy your own individual plan based on what you need and can afford. We'll provide a national safety net for individuals who can't get insurance or can't afford it, and we'll be able to do it for less than half of what Obamacare is going to cost, and we can do this as soon as we replace Obama as president.
Chad Mathis.
Well, I'm a doctor, and I've read all 2,462 pages of Obamacare, and we need to replace it with market-based, patient-centered reforms, and that's why I've come up with a 12-point plan to replace and repeal Obamacare. Let me tell you 3 of those things. 1, we need to shop for insurance across state lines. We need to expand HSAs, and we need to be able to have the same deductions as individuals as businesses get for their health insurance. Check out all of my 12-point plan at drmathisforcongress.com.
Tom Vignell.
I didn't pass the bill, I didn't read the bill, I've lived the bill. My health insurance rate went from $684 a month to $1,524 a month. Obamacare, you were talking about what we would do. It is going to implode on itself because it is so poorly done. You remember Nancy Pelosi said we had to pass it to find out what's in it? Well, we found out it's a disaster. We do need to have a free market system for health care.
Robert Chaddock.
The Affordable Care Act is a monstrosity born from a grossly dysfunctional government that is not a grossly dysfunctional Congress and a government that is not of, by, and for the people. And until a fix is, the primacy should be on fixing Congress, and until that happens, we are going to be spending years trying to thrash out, and will continue to have, an abomination for our health care system.
Will Brook.
Obamacare is a train wreck. We need to get rid of it and replace it with a free market solution. Look, folks, we know what to do. We need to have specific solutions for portability, competitiveness, availability of care at the lowest cost rendering point, and coverage for pre-existing conditions and coverage for adult children that are dependent on their parents. These solutions are easy, and they don't require sweeping 20% of the U.S. economy under the control of the federal government. We've got to be smarter than this.
We move on to question number 5. It comes from Superstation 101's Leland Whaley. Leland.
Gentlemen, our national budget is a mess. We're running ridiculous deficits. We're borrowing almost 40 cents on the dollar. We're building a national debt that cannot be sustained. As a congressman, would you ever vote for a budget that's not balanced?
We begin with Will Brook.
Well, you're right. We cannot afford and we cannot sustain deficits of the way that we have them now. The problem, Leland, is that if we slam the brakes on, it'd be like hitting a wall going 100 miles an hour. So the Congress has got to get real about a budget solution that points to the future, not far out in the future, but it's got to set goals for itself and then start working diligently to achieve those goals.
Paul DeMarco.
We balanced the budget in the late 90s. It can be done. We do it at home. We do it in the state of Alabama. We can do it in this country. But it's not going to happen overnight. You don't take $17.2 trillion overnight. But as a congressman, you can't do what was done before and vote while taking and saying, we're going to make this, resolve it once and for all. You just can't do it overnight, but you can make and say that it's got to be voted on without making concessions to balance this budget once and for all.
Scott Beeson.
You know, as conservatives, we want everything to be fixed right now. And one thing we have to learn as conservatives is incrementalism. The left understands it. They've put us in this bad situation over a number of years. And like my colleagues have said, you cannot put the brakes on instantly. But what you can do is elect people to Congress who will actually move the ball down the field. We have failed to do that during the last decade. Our Republicans in Congress are not putting the brakes on this, and we have to turn this ship around. We'll have to do it incrementally, but we'll have to do it a little bit at a time.
Chad Mathis.
We are $17 trillion in debt, and our debt is our greatest threat to our national security. and our future. If we don't balance our budget, we need to fix this. And I have to balance my budget at home and at work. We should have to balance the budget in Washington. And so I would support a balanced budget amendment because I think this is the only way that we can get Washington to listen.
Robert Shattuck.
Staggering federal debt is the outgrowth of a grossly dysfunctional Congress, and until we fix Congress, Congress is not going to fix the debt.
Gary Palmer.
First thing we need to do is introduce a balanced budget amendment. And then we need to look at the over 2,000 federal discretionary programs and start asking some hard questions. If it's something that government shouldn't be doing, we need to eliminate it. If it's duplicated at any level of federal government, we need to eliminate the duplications. And if it's done at the state level, we need to move it to the state, because the government closest to the people is the most transparent and the most efficient in the use of the taxpayers' money.
Tom Vignell.
Small businesses and families all across this district and all across the country have had to learn how to balance their budget with less. We have to do that at the federal level. You asked if I would vote for something that wasn't a balanced budget. Yes, I would, but only if we had a balanced budget amendment out in the future. The Republican leadership has let you down, they've let me down, and we have got to take a stand. We have to draw a line in the sand and say enough is enough.
We move on to question number 6 now, and that question comes from Linda White.
All right, thank you, Mike. Alabama is now one of 21 states that allows for the use of medicinal marijuana. 2 states allow for its recreational use. Is medical marijuana something you could support on a federal level? Why or why not?
And we begin with Robert Shattuck.
I don't consider my views on this matter important for consideration by the voters.
Next is Gary Palmer.
The bill that passed in the Alabama legislature is really not medical marijuana. It's a derivative from the hemp plant that helps epileptic victims avoid seizures. I would support that at the federal level.
Will Brook.
As Gary said, the bill that passed the Alabama legislature uses a derivative of the marijuana plant to provide a drug for treatment of a health condition. That's a very positive thing. The legislature's decision to send that to UAB for development was also a positive thing, capturing that intellectual property and opportunity for one of our state universities. We use controlled substances all the time in creating medications. As long as they're used safely, there's nothing wrong with that.
Scott Beeson.
Absolutely not, as far as legalizing marijuana just for general use. What we did in the state legislature, like these gentlemen said, was a derivative from it. There was an oil so that young children could get help. And the interesting thing was the bill was started in the House, but we had to pass it out of the Senate because so many elected officials were afraid a mail piece would come to their house saying they were for medical marijuana, and that's not the case. So we had to take the lead and do what was good for little kids in this state, and sometimes you have to make tough choices.
Tom Vignell.
Well, like they've said, it's an oil. I would not vote to pass recreational marijuana. There's way too many issues with that. But what they've done with Carley's Law for Alabama has been a great thing. It is going to help children that are having epileptic seizures in a great way. You can go to my website and find out the details on that at alabamafortom.com.
Chad Mathis.
I think Carley's Law was a good thing. It really helps out these children that have these epileptic seizures, and it really helps our UAB system and the neurology department to grow and expand their research. And so I think all in all, this was a great law that was passed, and we need to continue to look for more uses of medicines and grow the UAB neurology department.
Paul DeMarco.
I do not support or would not support legislation for medical marijuana. If the United States Congress were to tailor legislation after what was done in Alabama, Carley's Law, and what they did, I would support that as I did in the Alabama legislature.
All right, gentlemen, we move on to question number 7. Back to Barnett Wright. Barnett.
I have a question about the government's foreign surveillance program. How do you balance the needs between collecting information that can stop an attack like 9/11 with protecting the constitutional rights of Americans?
First to answer, Chad Mathis.
Well, you look at the Constitution. I think what you really are asking about is foreign agencies or foreign citizens versus our citizens. We always have to protect the rights of our citizens, and that is the utmost important. That is the #1 job of the Congress. And so that's where you look to protect the citizens.
Tom Vignell.
Well, that's where we've got to go to the Constitution. We've got to be constitutional in what we do. I believe in protecting American citizens, and I believe in tracking those that are across the seas, and I believe the NSA is doing a good job with that overseas, but we've got to make sure we have good oversight. The problem is who is providing the oversight. Look at this administration. We've got to have folks that are going to protect us and not look out for their own political interest.
Will Brook.
Ben Franklin said that anyone that will trade freedom for security deserves neither. The Fourth Amendment's very clear that we're to be secure in our persons, our property, our papers, and our effects. I think my email, my iPhone, and other things fit squarely under that. We need to be very careful as Americans about what we do to ourselves. We owe this duty to no one else, only to ourselves as U.S. citizens. It's fine to spy overseas, but not here in the U.S. Congress should protect us.
Robert Shattuck.
This is to be decided by persons who have more knowledge and expertise than I have.
Scott Beeson.
The Constitution comes first. You have a right to privacy, and that should be enforced in this country. You know, the Constitution is not a living document that changes over time. It's something we should adhere to throughout history. We should do that first, make sure that you have complete privacy. We should go after the bad guys. But as far as spying on foreign countries, that's just the way the world works. And we need to know what they're doing, and we need to continue those surveillance models. We ought to try our best not to get caught, but we should keep that up.
Next is Gary Palmer.
We actually have the intelligence resources that we need to protect the country. The Pentagon did a program called Operation Able Danger that actually identified Mohammed Atta 2 years before he led the attack on 9/11. What we need to do is make sure that our intelligence agencies have the resources they need so that they can do their job, but they absolutely should not be spying on the American public. I think the greatest danger we face right now is the loss of our Constitution.
And Paul DeMarco.
The United States Congress has got to use its authority to protect our privacy rights as guaranteed by the United States Constitution. But let's not forget what happened on 9/11. We do not want that to happen ever again. So let's make sure we put the right people who balance our privacy rights, but at the same time make sure that 9/11 never happens again.
We'll move quickly to question 8, and that will come from Leland Whaling.
Our U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions has almost single-handedly killed every attempt at amnesty or de facto amnesty in the United States Senate. And while House Speaker John Boehner and several in the House leadership have worked over the years to compromise on the issue, would you take the Sessions approach or the Boehner approach?
Paul DeMarco.
I am not for amnesty. We are a nation of laws. This is a great country. People want to come to this country because it is a great country. And we've got a system of laws in place to come to this country legally. It is not fair for somebody who is waiting in line to put them behind somebody who comes in this country illegally. I'm opposed to amnesty and appreciate what Senator Sessions is doing to make sure that the laws of our nation are enforced.
Gary Palmer.
Senator Sessions and I have had many discussions about this, and this whole debate about amnesty gives lip service to securing our borders. We have first got to secure our borders before we address any other aspect about this, and then we need to do exactly what Senator Sessions is calling for, uphold the rule of law. If we don't uphold the rule of law, then we really don't have a debate about anything else in this country.
Chad Mathis.
I'm against any form of amnesty. I think when the Republicans gave in on amnesty before, we saw that they didn't get border security after. So we have to have border security before we even begin talking about what to do with the illegal aliens. We must not do immigration reform under this president either, because he's proven time and time again that he will not follow the rule of law either.
Tom Vignell.
Our president doesn't care about protecting our borders. Where is the House Republicans standing up and saying enough is enough? We have enough laws on the books. We don't have to pass another law. We have to make sure we enforce the law. You asked which way I would do it. I would tell you I agree with Sessions, but what are we going to do with the 15 million people here? We've got to have a solution for that.
Scott Beeson.
I doubt there's anyone in this building that doesn't know my position when it comes to amnesty or illegal immigration. When we were fighting the fight in this state, trying to protect the taxpayers, trying to protect those people looking for entry-level jobs who are unemployed, I talked to Senator Sessions multiple times, and I can absolutely positively tell you that I would be with Senator Sessions on this. It's important for the future of the country, it's important for our economy, and we have to do the right thing. We cannot cave in.
Will Brook.
I also am opposed to amnesty. I have also discussed this with Senator Sessions and think his memorandum to the House members was spot on why we cannot and should not think about amnesty. We need to close the borders. First order priority, can't get anything done until that is done. And again, Congress should insist that this president do his job under the Constitution and enforce the laws that are already on the books.
Robert Shattuck.
I'm sorry to sound so repetitive. There has not been any passed. I think an immigration law should be passed. It has not been passed. There's no telling when it's going to be passed, and I chalk it up to a dysfunctional Congress, and you're not going to begin to make progress until you fix Congress.
You are watching the debate for the 6th Congressional District seat in Alabama on Alabama's 13 and Superstation 101, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Now, here again is tonight's moderator, Alabama's 13's Mike Royer.
Welcome back, everyone, to the debate for the 6th District Congressional seat. All 7 candidates running for the Republican nomination are on the stage, and now we're going to move to a closing statement from each one and each one. And by the way, the candidates have honored the clock all night long. Each will have 1 minute. We'll begin with the closing statement from Will Brook.
We need to send a different set of leaders to Washington if we really want to see the country back on track. We're not intended to have a governing class in the American structure. The founders didn't intend it that way, but yet we do. Healthcare is a great example of that as they try to lure every man, woman, and child into a web of dependency that's ultimately controlled by a set of party elites in Washington, D.C. We need to send independent people who are not beholden to the special interest, who are not inured to the system, and who can exercise the will of the people as opposed to the will of the political class. I hope to return to Washington after doing noble work there, to come back to the deer stands and the swamps of Alabama to hunt with my sons. I look forward to that day, but there's work to do in between. I had fun a couple of weeks ago going down and tearing up a copy of Obamacare with a few weapons and a wood chipper, and it was a lot of fun. But there's serious work to do in Washington. We need to send serious people who are independent enough to actually make a difference. Thank you.
Robert Shattuck is next.
Here's what I suggest you do. Go home tonight, take out a sheet of paper. On the left-hand side, put down, thinking back over what Congress has done over the past 20 years, examples where you think Congress has done a good job for the American people. On the right-hand side, list all those examples that you think evidence poor performance by Congress, which may be inaction by Congress. After you do that, then give an overall grade to Congress for the past 20 years. I did this morning. I gave them an F. Then ask yourself, why is Congress performing so poorly? What is my diagnosis of why this is happening, and what can possibly be done to improve it? I've been dedicating my campaign to that exercise. I cannot elicit any interest from the other candidates, but that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Gary Palmer.
Over my career, I've held hourly jobs, worked for small business, 2 major engineering companies, and for 24 years led Alabama's most influential conservative organization, working on solving problems just like we've talked about tonight. But this is about more than just public policy ideas. It's about people and families who are concerned about their future. 1 in 6 men between 25 and 54 are unemployed. We need to use the God-given resources that we have to create jobs and get people back to work. I believe we still have an opportunity in this nation to get us back on the right track, but that window's closing. Great change always begins at the local level. What we need in Congress are people who have the national network, the credibility, who know what to do and how to do it, and can get it done. I have that national network, I have that credibility, and I know what to do, and that's what I'll do when I get to Congress.
Chad Mathis.
Everyone up here is against Obamacare, and who wouldn't be? But as a doctor, I'm seeing the ill effects of this law on patient care and the economies. And that's why I've been working with doctors in Congress to come up with my 12-point plan. And if elected, I will be on a part of the Doctors Caucus, and I'll be fast-tracked to committees with jurisdiction over health care. If you want more of the same, if you want the status quo, you have plenty to choose from. But if you want someone who will fight for you, who will not settle, then please check my website out, drmathisforcongress.com, and vote for me. Good night, and God bless.
Paul DeMarco.
Thank you. I'm proud to say I've lived here my whole life. I was born and raised here. I'm going to raise my family here. I was married in the church for which I was baptized. This is my home. And I'm going to take those Alabama conservative values to Washington, D.C., not bring the Washington, D.C. values back to Alabama. We need to remember that our elected officials need to remember why they were elected. But they were elected because they need to support the folks who they were there to lead, their people back home. Ask the people in my House district. I think they will tell you, I'm everywhere. I'm responsive, and I work hard, and I work day and night to represent the people in my district in Washington, D.C., and make you proud. I would appreciate your vote and your prayers. Thank you, and God bless.
Scott Beeson.
Everyone in here wants the same thing. Everyone watching on TV wants the same thing. They want a great future. The country can have a renaissance. We can do better. But people across the country are going to debates like this, and they're listening to candidates, and they're hearing the same things over and over. And you're going to hear the same things here tonight. You have heard the same things. Some people are more practiced. Some people are more polished. Some people hit the polling points perfectly. so that there's a response out there among the voters. But I want to ask yourself a question. We keep sending good people to Washington, and for some reason there's a machine apparently in the airport that removes their spine. And you're hiring someone to do a job for you. And I want you to sit back and not decide who's the nicest or who's the cutest or who do you know or who was in your Sunday school class. Choose the person that you think will do the best job for you, and you make that decision based on who has the best proven record. I have that record, and I will lead in Congress.
Tom Vignell.
Why would a small businessman ever want to do what I'm doing tonight? I ask myself that in the mirror every morning. If we keep doing what we're doing, we keep doing the same things, electing the same type of folks, guess what, folks? We keep getting the same results. We have to change, fundamentally change what we're doing in Washington, D.C. Do you think that the federal government is efficient? Do you think you like the federal government looking over your shoulders? I don't think so. It's time to return the federal government back to the Constitution. I'm not looking for what bills I can pass. I'm looking for what bills we can eliminate. I'm looking for what taxes we can cut, and I want to return the power to where it rightfully belongs, to you, the people. We're going to be holding town hall meetings and city meetings all through this district once I'm elected. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you all very much. We're going to continue in a moment with more questions. We'll continue on Alabamas13.com. That's going to conclude the broadcast portion of our debate tonight. But as I said, live coverage continues on Alabamas13.com. A reminder to vote. I voted every election I've ever been old enough to vote in, and I encourage you to do the same. The primary election will be on June the 3rd. Remember, you have to have a photo ID for the first time for this election. They're free and easy to get. Participate in the process. Vote for the man in this race that you think will serve our district and our state the best. Thank you to Barnett, Leland, and Linda. Thank you for the good questions. A round of applause for all of our candidates tonight. Thank you so much. And we're glad that we were able to give this opportunity to all of our viewers and listeners tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, and join us as we continue on Alabamas13.com.
You've been watching an Alabama's 13 News special event, the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama, sponsored by Extreme Concepts Incorporated, Waldrop Stewart & Kendrick, LLC, Outsider Inside the Supreme Court by Sean McCutcheon, and Cartridge World Vestavia Hills. Thanks for joining us. Tonight's coverage continues now live on Alabamas13.com. Welcome back to the Republican primary debate for the 6th Congressional District of Alabama. Now, here again is tonight's moderator, Alabama's 13's Mike Roy.
Welcome back, everybody. We're continuing our debate on alabamas13.com. We welcome you back. We enjoyed our hour-long debate live on Channel 13. The candidates all did a great job. We had good questions. We're going to ask 3 more questions of our candidates here on alabamas13.com and then call it a night. We hope you've enjoyed the debate both on television and here on the World Wide Web as well. Let's have Linda White ask another question. Linda.
Thank you, Mike. Gentlemen, what countries have you visited, and would those experiences overseas help you in foreign diplomacy decisions and votes?
Let's begin with Robert Shattuck.
This is outside my function. I mean, don't send me to Congress regarding foreign relations.
Paul DeMarco.
I've visited 2 nations, Italy and Mexico. I think what makes this nation so great is that we're the leader of the world. And we have lost our prestige over the past number of years under the current president. You look what's going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Asia. We have got to regain the respect of the rest of the nation, the rest of the world.
Chad Mathis.
I've been to Mexico and Canada, but you know what's most important in our diplomatic policy is that we are the leaders of the free world, and we have to remain strong and vigilant. And this president has failed us. He has led from behind. He's failed us in Iran. He's failed us in Libya with Benghazi. He's also failed us in the Crimea now. And we must have a strong foreign policy, and our military must remain strong.
Tom Vignell.
I've been fortunate to travel to a number of countries: Mexico, Canada, Israel, Greece, Curacao. The thing I could take from what I've learned overseas is we don't want to be Greece, and we're headed that way with our national debt. But the thing that we can learn from Israel is how to do airport security a whole lot better.
Scott Beeson.
I've been to Australia, Mexico, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, Colombia, Honduras. The most recent 2 were Colombia and Honduras. And a couple of things that I noticed is that people all around the world want to have a relationship with the United States. And we have let those relationships fail militarily and economically. We need to put our best foot forward so that we can have a strong America in these places. China is all over the world working economically, and we need to push that back.
Gary Palmer.
I've been to England, Mexico, and Massachusetts. And to give you an idea how messed up our foreign policy is, look at Syria, where you had liberals wanting to go to war and the French were backing them up. What Obama has done with our foreign policy is basically put Putin in a position to dictate what goes on not only in Syria, but the Middle East. And he's also dictating foreign policy in the Crimea.
And Will Brook.
I've been privileged to travel extensively with both business and missions work. I've been throughout Scandinavia, Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and I think that would be helpful to me in understanding the duties of Congress. In particular, what comes to mind is China. China is an expanding and expansive nation that one day will be a superpower. We need to be forging partnerships there in an effort to avoid conflict and increase understanding, but through a strong military. Peace through strength is the key.
2 more questions, gentlemen. Barnett Wright, another question from you, please.
Do you believe the defense of marriage requires a constitutional amendment? In other words, would you support an amendment to the Constitution that would define marriage as a union between a man and a woman?
Scott Beeson.
I knew I would get that first. Marriage is a union between a man and a woman. I don't know any other definition of marriage. I would support that in any way. I've supported the constitutional amendment in Alabama that banned gay marriage and only recognized traditional marriage, and I would do anything I can to continue that tradition. Those are traditional American values, and they should be defended.
Next, Robert Shattuck.
In this big number that the political class in Washington, D.C. is doing on the American people, one of their chief tools is to keep the electorate divided and keep Republicans and Democrats riled up and angry at each other, even to the degree of hating. I would say many of the cultural issues are exploited by the political class on their respective sides for this purpose, and you're playing into their hands.
Gary Palmer.
I do believe in a constitutional amendment to define marriage, but I want to say this. The definition of marriage pre-exists government. Marriage is what it is. But where we are right now in this country is that we've gone from a debate over the right to marry to the rights of every Christian in America being under threat, being forced to accept a position that they cannot accept, and we need to protect those rights.
Chad Mathis.
I don't believe we need a constitutional amendment for that, because marriage is a gift from God, and it is between one man and one woman, period. We don't need anything else that says anything different.
Tom Vignell.
I believe in the biblical standard for marriage, and what I'm afraid of is that we do have to pass a constitutional amendment, because we have a constitutional president that doesn't understand what the Constitution means. So we need to have it written out so he can understand that a marriage is between a man and a woman.
Will Brook.
Marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's kind of that. But I will say this, as a man of faith, I feel strongly about this, but it's not the most important issue that our country faces right now. Our burgeoning debt, the constitutional crisis that our country faces, the acts that our president is taking in defiance of his constitutional duties, those pose a much more immediate threat to us, and that's where we need to focus.
Paul DeMarco.
It's my faith and my belief that marriage is sanctity between a union of a man and a woman. That's how I feel. I think that's how this country feels, and I believe and would support that amendment, because that is something that we need to continue to support, the faith of marriage between man and a woman.
We come to our final question. I know you all listen to Leland Live every day and will in the future. Let's end our debate with a final question from Leland Whaley. Leland?
Gentlemen, we've got the IRS targeting political groups, the NSA spying on Americans, President Obama rewriting the immigration laws, rewriting his own health care laws, the EPA harassing businesses. The executive branch is out of control. What is Congress going to do? What can you do to get the balance of power restored, at least according to the Constitution?
We start with Paul DeMarco.
First and foremost, you send the right people to Congress. People of courage who will step up to the plate, not be afraid to take on the tough issues, and not be afraid to take the votes against even members of their own party if they're wrong. Take a conservative fiscal approach that government is best at home, that we need less government, not more government, that we can cut and make this country great again.
Scott Beeson.
When we restore that balance by taking the power back from the executive branch, what we did in this country for decades was trust the executive, because we always thought we would elect good people. You know, the founders said you had to elect good Christian people, and that's what their belief was, because our government is set up for honest people. So the Congress has to begin to pull back the regulatory power of the executive branch that President Obama is just simply using more than any president ever has, and we have to make that stop.
Next, Gary Palmer.
Jonathan Turley, a liberal Democrat, testified in a House hearing a few weeks ago that unless Congress exercises its constitutional powers to rein in the executive branch, we're in danger of losing the Constitution. I want to say that Congress, though, is complicit in this. They keep passing laws that are not laws, but really delegate the lawmaking power to the executive branch. Congress has to exercise its constitutional authority to rein in the executive branch.
Robert Shattuck.
I'm getting repetitive. All of this is an outgrowth of a dysfunctional Congress and a dysfunctional government. I cannot get these candidates to discuss that, to try to diagnose this, to try to suggest ideas for improving the situation.
Will Brook.
Well, the first thing Congress needs to do is indict Lois Lerner for contempt of Congress. Then we need to get rid of a few agencies that we don't need that are meddling in our lives, like the Department of Education. Then we need to investigate overreaches by the President of the United States and start denying funding authority to agencies that are abusing their mandate. Congress needs to pull up its big boy pants and do its job.
Chad Mathis.
Well, Congress controls the purse strings, and that's how it has its checks and balances. So it does not fund programs that it doesn't find to be correct. It needs to pull in these programs, shut them down, particularly the Department of Education. That needs to be brought back to the states. And so the waste, fraud, and abuse and duplications of services that you're finding in the government, the Congress's job is to find these and shut them down.
And Tom Vignell.
When you send me to Washington, one of the first votes we'll have is on the Speaker of the House, and I will be a vote to replace Boehner as Speaker. We have to change who's leading us so that we can make a difference. The House of Representatives, we have the majority, and they don't do anything with the bully pulpit from there. We have to be able to have Republicans that are going to take a stand against this president and against the unconstitutionals that he keeps writing with his pen.
That's going to conclude tonight's debate here at the Wright Center at Samford University. We want to thank the candidates once again, our panel who asked our questions tonight with great questions, and the audience both here in the auditorium, on the air, and online as well. We want to thank the folks here at the Wright Center and Samford University for hosting our debate tonight. We want to thank our partners, the Jefferson County Republican Party, Samford University Republicans, WYDE Superstation 101. We send you now to Alabama's 13 and Bettina Boughton for analysis of tonight's debate. And again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching.
Mike, thank you so much. And of course, thank you to all of our viewers who were joined us on air and of course online. Joining us again is Dr. Larry Powell of UAB, trusted political analyst and pretty much the guy that we go to here in our community, no matter where you stand, on helping us flesh out the rhetoric. And boy, do we have rhetoric this evening. We talked about Obamacare, we talked about global warming, and we talked about the issues that people have with the growing debt. Where do we begin, Dr. Powell?
Well, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of distinction between the candidates, but they're, it was the first quarter of a long football game, and they were getting their plays in pretty well.
Speaking of the candidates, for those folks who are joining us online right now, let's just kind of go over them. Of course, we had Scott Beason, current senator here in the state of Alabama, Will Brook, current state House representative, Paul DeMarco, Chad Mathis, Gary Palmer, Robert Shattuck, and Tom Vignell. 7 strong voices. Let's kick off with the first question, of course, that kind of really opened up everything. And that was, again, as we show our viewers some snips from the 1-hour debate that started at 6 o'clock. But the first question was, why are you the best person, the best man for this job? And in this kind of arena, I guess basically they had to say, why were they the best? Why would they be the best person to send to Congress? So the first person to kick that off was Scott Beason. He started off saying he has 16 plus years as a state lawmaker in our state.
Well, what you get here is each individual got a chance to say their positive message. This is going to be the thing that all of them are going to be emphasizing in the last few days of the campaign, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it works out with the voters. Beason's going to rely very heavily upon his record, what he's done in the state Senate, and he broadcast that loud and clear here.
Yeah, speaking of record, Representative Paul DeMarco, the other lawmaker who is running for this seat, he also talked about his track record, talking about if you want to see the facts, look at it. He said, quote, he has a track record of facing difficult issues, even if it's against his own party members.
That is going to be his positive message. Notice that he is indeed relying upon his track record, much like Beason, but he's saying that his record includes taking on a lot of the powerful people, not always winning, but taking them on. And that's something that's going to play very well with the conservatives in the group.
The 5 other gentlemen basically had an overarching theme. They said that they were not politicians. Let's start with Shattuck. I think for those who tuned in, a lot of times his question could either be a response that, hey, I don't know it. Is that a turn off or a turn on for those folks who are saying that they're not looking for the traditional politician, if you will?
He is refreshingly honest, but they're looking for the traditional politician, and this is going to hurt him. I mean, of the people who saw this, they're going to be impressed with his openness, but they're not going to necessarily going to vote for him.
Brooke and Vignell kept saying that they are the trusted business owners, and they are looking to bring the, I guess, the man on the street, if you will, voice to D.C. This could be either a good or bad thing, but like you said earlier, we're talking about a position that has been held for more than 20 years, and this is a pretty strong position on the national forefront.
Yeah, whoever gets elected is going to be up there for several years, and Brooke is counting on his background in his religious background, his religious faith, and his business background to be a strong voice here. He doesn't have the political record of DeMarco or Beeson, but he's been fairly active in politics.
Yeah, Mathis, also a doctor in this case, also leading the way in terms of financial backing. He's got a lot of money on this.
Dr. Mathis does indeed have a lot of money, and it's not surprising. There are a lot of doctors in the House.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not unfeasible at all for him to have a good shot of getting into the runoff at least. Yeah. He got the money to run the campaign, and he's got the pet issue that is the one that a lot of Republicans are looking at right now. He can go out for Obamacare from a position that nobody else can.
When we were talking during the break, you said, Bettina, this is really the first quarter of the football game. But you mentioned runoff just a few minutes ago. For those folks who are kind of thinking about it, how likely is a runoff in this case?
A runoff is extremely likely. You got 7 candidates, and mathematically it's going to be very hard for any one candidate to get a majority of the vote. Now you're looking at, if you can get 30% plus, you're probably going to make the runoff. And the catch is not falling into the 20% category where you may have a good run and be proud of what you did, but still fall short.
Of course, the primary is on June 3rd, so if there is a runoff, it's going to be in July. Another issue that obviously on today is the deadline for the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, if you will. That questioning came into play today, and you know, it's a topic that all the candidates, of course, vehemently are against Obamacare. Let's talk about that.
Everybody's against it. Not all of them had a plan to replace it. And that has been one of the problems that the Republicans in Congress have been facing so far. They don't know exactly what to do about it.
Right.
And so we've got some of the candidates here who've got some ideas. It's not as easy to repeal as the debate might have led you to believe.
I was just about to ask you that.
It's in law, and furthermore, it's not funded normally, so you can't just defund it automatically. It's largely self-funded. You can knock out some of the funding, but it's not easy to repeal it because of that. You're going to have to find alternative means of going at it if you want to change it.
Absolutely, and a lot of the common theme that many of the candidates, I wouldn't say each and every one with the exception of Shattuck, talked about the market-based approach. Again, free market option. Mathis, Dr. Mathis said, is the only one that came out that really touted his 12-point plan, and of the 3 he talked about expanding HSA and things, but like you said, it's not that easy, and it would be costly to the taxpayer as well.
It would be very costly to replace, and you know, one of the options, or practically any option, is going to have to be subsidies for those who can't afford it, and that's still going to be a big bite into the federal budget. And how do you do that without making a lot of people mad is something we'll have to wait and see.
All right, another one that caused a little bit of a reaction from the crowd in terms of a chuckle, but it's not a laughing matter depending on who you ask, is the question about global warming. The question was asked, and again, you and I talked about it, and if you talk to the farmer who's out there on the farm, the conservative farmer that openly says, hey, I'm a conservative, global warming is quite real to that farmer.
Very much so. This is an issue that divides Republicans nationwide. everybody gave the right answer for the district in which they're running. The effects of global warming are not particularly apparent in an urban and a suburban environment. But the farmers out there, and farmers are heavily Republican in their voting right now, they are concerned about it. And they see less and less rainfall each year. They're concerned about watering their crops. Alabama in particular does not have a good irrigation system for its agricultural, and so they're not going to lose any votes by what they said, but it's a tougher issue than they would have you would have learned by just listening to this debate. You've got the expert ear. What do you think were some of the most important moments from tonight? Well, the most memorable moment is going to be Mr. Shattuck and his refusal to answer some of the questions because he said he simply didn't know or didn't consider them relevant. And that's going to be something that the voters out there are going to be talking about for a while. Like I say, I don't know that that's actually going to help him, but that was a key moment. The other thing that was noticeable about it, from my viewpoint, was the lack of negative attacks on each other. There was no attempt to knock anybody off, no attempt to get any major one-upmanship by criticizing what the others were saying, except for Shattuck. And he may be limited because he didn't respond to every question. This was a very polite debate in which they followed the 11th commandment for Republicans, in which you don't say anything negative about each other. It's funny that you said that about Shattuck. I want to quote him on the question of foreign diplomacy. He said, "Don't send me to Congress," quote, regarding foreign relations. He basically said, I am not the guy on that front. Again, that's going to be left up to the voter on if that is refreshing or if that is beneficial. So with that being said, we covered a lot of topics, and I know it's hard to really pinpoint a candidate that stood out, but who do you think, if you will, won this debate? Well, the two who had the strongest showing were Scott Beason and Paul DeMarco, but they probably came in with the best support anyway. Will Brooke made a strong basis for getting people to take a look at him. Dr. Chad Mathis also had a very strong thing. I didn't think there were any bad debates. If you're looking at the people who may have come the most, Gary Palmer, relatively unknown coming into this, and yet he used the debate not only to articulate his positions, his knowledge of the positions, but to let the audience know that he's got some expertise on these issues. And that's pretty tough to pull off in a short debate like this, and I thought he did a good job doing it. Absolutely. Well, for those folks who were not able to catch the closing moments, we do have some of the closing statements from all 7 of the candidates, and we want to bring that to you right now, and then we'll come back on the other side to just do a quick recap and tell you what's next. We need to send a different set of leaders to Washington if we really want to see the country back on track. We're not intended to have a governing class in the American structure. The founders didn't intend it that way, but yet we do. Healthcare is a great example of that, as they try to lure every man, woman, and child into a web of dependency that's ultimately controlled by a set of party elites in Washington, D.C. We need to send independent people who are not beholden to the special interest, who are not inured to the system, and who can exercise the will of the people as opposed to the will of the political class. I hope to return to Washington after doing noble work there, to come back to the deer stands and the swamps of Alabama to hunt with my sons. I look forward to that day, but there's work to do in between. I had fun a couple of weeks ago going down and tearing up a copy of Obamacare with a few weapons and a wood chipper, and it was a lot of fun. But there's serious work to do in Washington. We need to send serious people who are independent enough to actually make a difference. Thank you.
Robert Shattuck is next.
Here's what I suggest you do. Go home tonight, take out a sheet of paper. On the left-hand side, put down, thinking back over what Congress has done over the past 20 years, examples where you think Congress has done a good job for the American people. On the right-hand side, list all those examples that you think evidence poor performance by Congress, which may be inaction by Congress. After you do that, then give an overall grade to Congress for the past 20 years. I did this morning. I gave them an F. Then ask yourself, why is Congress performing so poorly? what is my diagnosis of why this is happening and what can possibly be done to improve it. I've been dedicating my campaign to that exercise. I cannot elicit any interest from the other candidates, but that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Gary Palmer.
Over my career, I've held hourly jobs, worked for small business, 2 major engineering companies, and for 24 years led Alabama's most influential conservative organization, working on solving problems just like we've talked about tonight. But this is about more than just public policy ideas. It's about people and families who are concerned about their future. 1 in 6 men between 25 and 54 are unemployed. We need to use the God-given resources that we have to create jobs and get people back to work. I believe we still have an opportunity in this nation to get us back on the right track, but that window's closing. Great change always begins at the local level. What we need in Congress are people who have the national network, the credibility, who know what to do and how to do it, and can get it done. I have that national network, I have that credibility, and I know what to do, and that's what I'll do when I get to Congress.
Chad Mathis.
Everyone up here is against Obamacare, and who wouldn't be? But as a doctor, I'm seeing the ill effects of this law on patient care and the economies. And that's why I've been working with doctors in Congress to come up with my 12-point plan. And if elected, I will be on a part of the Doctors Caucus, and I'll be fast-tracked to committees with jurisdiction over health care. If you want more of the same, if you want the status quo, you have plenty to choose from. But if you want someone who will fight for you, who will not settle, then please check my website out, drmathisforcongress.com, and vote for me. Good night, and God bless.
Paul DeMarco.
Thank you. I'm proud to say I've lived here my whole life. I was born and raised here. I'm going to raise my family here. I was married in the church for which I was baptized. This is my home. And I'm going to take those Alabama conservative values to Washington, D.C., not bring the Washington, D.C. values back to Alabama. We need to remember that our elected officials need to remember why they were elected. But they were elected because they need to support the folks who they were there to lead, their people back home. Ask the people in my House district. I think they will tell you, I'm everywhere. I'm responsive and I work hard, and I will work day and night to represent the people in my district in Washington, D.C. and make you proud. I would appreciate your vote and your prayers. Thank you and God bless.
Scott Beeson.
Everyone in here wants the same thing. Everyone watching on TV wants the same thing. They want a great future. The country can have a renaissance. We can do better. But people across the country are going to debates like this, and they're listening to candidates, and they're hearing the same things over and over. And you're going to hear the same things here tonight. You have heard the same things. Some people are more practiced. Some people are more polished. Some people hit the polling points perfectly so that there's a response out there among the voters. But I want to ask yourself a question. We keep sending good people to Washington. And for some reason, there's a machine apparently in the airport that removes their spine. And you're hiring someone to do a job for you. And I want you to sit back and not decide who's the nicest or who's the cutest or who do you know or who was in your Sunday school class. Choose the person that you think will do the best job for you, and you make that decision based on who has the best proven record. I have that record, and I will lead in Congress.
Tom Vignell.
Why would a small businessman ever want to do what I'm doing tonight? I ask myself that in the mirror every morning. If we keep doing what we're doing, we keep doing the same things, electing the same type of folks, guess what, folks? We keep getting the same results. We have to change, fundamentally change what we're doing in Washington, D.C. Do you think that the federal government is efficient? Do you think you like the federal government looking over your shoulders? I don't think so. It's time to return the federal government back to the Constitution. I'm not looking for what bills I can pass. I'm looking for what bills we can eliminate. I'm looking for what taxes we can cut, and I want to return the power to where it rightfully belongs, to you, the people. We're going to be holding town hall meetings and city town meetings, or city meetings all through this district once I'm elected. Thank you.
Some very strong closing statements from, of course, the 7 candidates vying for Congressman Backus' seat, again, the 6th Congressional District. Lots of memorable things. Dr. Powell, for those folks who are joining us now, what should they keep in mind as we move closer to the primary in June?
Keep listening. There's more to come, and what's going to come next is going to be extremely important.
Dr. Powell, always pleasure to have you here. And of course, thank you so much for joining us. We want to thank, of course, again, Dr. Larry Powell, UAB political analyst, of our supporters, our partners, that is, of course, helping us with this debate, and you for joining us. On behalf of Alabama's 13, we will continue our coverage tonight for you at 10. Do join us there, and do stay up to date with Decision 2014, Republican debate of the 6th Congressional District of Alabama, online on alabamas13.com. Take care, be well, and we'll see you tonight on the News at 10.